Okay, everybody. Would somebody like to just wave on the screen? Can you hear us? Okay. Yep. Fine. Lovely. Great stuff. Okay. Welcome to Canny Hall. Let's get started on the joint committee. So, without further ado, minutes of the meeting we held in December. Are we happy with those minutes? Okay. Good. Thank you very much indeed. Apologies for absence, Sarah.
Okay, we've just got Council Carr and other business.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Any declarations of interest by members or officers? Firstly, on pecuniary interests, take that as none. And on private interests, I'll take that as none as well. Okay, so let's get on to the main meat of the agenda. Item 4, the consultation on the reforms to the NPPF. And Matt, would you like to start things off?
Yes. Report in your agenda pack has a brief summary of the proposed changes to coming through planning reform, and attached as appendices are the two responses from the two councils, which there is, I'd say, there's a good degree of commonality between the two. But what I'm going to do is just explain what the government is proposing. So, the consultation, which closed very recently, was looking to introduce planning changes via the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. There's also a track change version of the NPPF out for consultation, and that is will be implemented early. The proposal from government is that the final version following this consultation will be published in the spring, so that is quite soon. And they're also canvassing opinion on proposed national development management policies that they've previously trailed. Just to cover some of the important aspects of the consultation, which are of particular relevance to the board, the government will be exploring the implications for the standard method once the new household projections are published in 2024, but they're not proposing any changes until that time. They are going to be including more explicit guidance on what types of local characteristics might justify the use of a different method from the government standard method. And they do quote one example of an appropriate characteristic as being a university town with an above average proportion of students. So that may be of relevance to Nottingham City going forward. Continuing on the theme of housing need, the draft NPPF also includes revisions that spell out that local planning authorities will not need to review their green belts, even if meeting housing need would not be possible without such a review. In other words, councils will not need to meet the entirety of their need if they are entirely green belt and can only meet that need through a green belt review. Councils will also be able to take past over delivery of housing into account when assessing future housing need. What the suggestion is that if planning permissions granted exceed the provision in the current plan, then that surplus may be deducted from what needs to be provided in the next plan. Now, that may well be relevant to Nottingham City, who have over provided over the past few years against the aligned core strategy. The government intends to retain the uplift of 35% to the assessed housing need for those 20 largest towns and cities in England. They also go on to clarify that as far as possible, this uplift should be met within the cities concerned rather than exported to surrounding areas, except where there is voluntary cross-boundary agreement to do so. So no change to the 35% uplift at the present time. In terms of housing supply, those authorities who have up-to-date local plan will no longer need to publish annual 5-year land supply information, and councils will no longer have to provide a 5-year buffer to that calculation, which effectively meant it was a 6-year land supply. So they're getting rid of that requirement for the buffer. In terms of plan making, the test of soundness is to be softened. The removal of one of the tests, the justified test, should enable plans to be prepared more quickly without undue and unnecessary evidence. There will still be a requirement for evidence, of course, but the idea is that this will remove the areas where local authorities produce evidence out of an abundance of caution. The duty to cooperate will be replaced by an alignment policy. There is no detail on that alignment policy yet, and further consultation will take place later in the year on that. In terms of tackling climate change, the government is considering the introduction of a carbon assessment in planning policy, although the details of that, as for some of the other measures in the consultation, are at present very woolly, and we would look forward to seeing more detail on those to ensure that they are not too onerous on local planning authorities or applicants. Policy and guidance in relation to the production of strategic flood risk assessments is also to be looked at again. Returning to plan making and the transitional arrangements, local planning authorities will have until mid-2025, 30th of June 2025, to submit local plans of various types under the current existing framework. There will be a guillotine to that, and plans need to be adopted by the 31st of December 2026 in order to benefit from that transitional arrangement, and authorities that do not meet that deadline will prepare plans under the new plan making system. The government is also proposing to do away with supplementary planning documents and to replace them with what they call supplementary plans, which will have the same weight as local plans, but will also need more robust preparation procedures in order to carry that weight. In terms of the National Development Management Policies, there is an intention to consult next year on these, and these are intended to cover planning considerations that are regularly applied across England or significant parts of it. So where there's a great deal of commonality in policy approach, it could be around the examples here: heritage assets, green belt, areas of high flood risk. But the consultation does also ask for other suggestions where national development management policies may be prepared. In terms of the other changes proposed, authorities will need to ensure that housing for elderly people is more thoroughly addressed in their plans, and social rent homes will be given a higher priority within the NPPF than they currently have. And slightly bizarrely, they do suggest mansard roofs are an appropriate form of upward extension, which does, the detail of which seems a little out of kilter with the rest of the consultation. So in terms of what's happening next, there will be a wider review of the NPPF following assent of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, and there will be further consultation on those elements that remain unclear at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I just wonder if anybody in the government ever tried to construct a mansard roof. They're not the best at all. Cracky. Right. So, yeah, it's interesting to note the few changes, like the duty to cooperate, and I'm interested to know what alignment policy actually means. That would be fascinating to find out what the dictionary definition of alignment policy is. So we'll wait on that one. This short questionnaire, which I'm grateful to both City and County colleagues for responding to that very brief questionnaire, which I'm sure only took a few seconds to fill in. Anyway, without further ado, let's invite comments. Pavlos?
So, just speaking on behalf of the city, raising a few points, we do have the consultation, obviously,
Sorry, Pavlos, sorry to stop you. Could you just press the right-hand button because there are people on the screen where we have
Just-
to hear you?
Yes.
Cheers.
So, yeah, on behalf of the city, and obviously making some comments that I've already made on JPUB, but I just want to repeat them for the sake of people who weren't there. So, the first thing I'd like to talk about is obviously the positive aspects of it. So, there are some positives to it. Obviously, there's the inspection. So, when the inspection happens on plans, and we have to obviously talk about housing supply and how we meet that housing supply. We will be given the opportunity to actually use more reasons why we can't meet that. So the city has an issue with the 35% uplift, as you all know. So we will be able to use reasons such as the impact of densification, inappropriate type of development in suburban areas, and so on, to be able to argue against kind of those targets that we can't necessarily meet as a city because of our tight boundary and because of the type of development we have. It's also positive that we have the ability to use past over delivery of housing, which we already have at the moment, to be able to add that to figures that come up in the future as well. So that's a positive move as well. But overall, we are disappointed in the city about the keeping of the 35% uplift for city regions. And obviously, we're looking at the removal of buffers completely, which is obviously welcome. But at the same time, there is not enough explanation within those proposals that came in of how we will be able to justify those housing supply numbers. Like, if we can't meet those housing supply numbers, how are we going to justify the fact that we can't? And obviously, the alignment test is not complete yet. So we're moving from the duty to cooperate into something called the alignment test. And that will have something to do with that 35% uplift as well. But there's not enough detail there. So again, we're not happy about the fact that the government is not really thinking about the effect that policies like that will have on cities like Nottingham, and the fact that Nottingham will not be able to meet those targets, as we already know, and there is no provision within those plans in detail to help us in that. Now, talking in general about the planning reform, there are a few bits and bobs. So they suggest a 30-month period to be able to produce plans. Now, I've said before, and I'll just repeat that, is that the fact that we have an issue with this 30-month rule because different areas have different, characteristics. Like, urban areas are more complex than county areas. So 30 months overall for every single area in the country is not applicable because different areas will require more time for plan making. So urban areas would require more time than county areas. So 30 months is just a meaningless number there in terms of time. The other thing that I was also mentioned last time was about supplementary plans. Now, in the city, we use effectively SPDs to do a number of different things. So we have an SPD for affordable housing contributions from purpose-built student accommodation. We have a supplementary planning document on, the park conservation area just came in. Now we will be voting it in. We have another one for open spaces and so on and so forth. So we do a lot of different things with them. Now, those SPDs are not difficult to produce. They take a short amount of time. There is a certain protocol about consultation we do. It's doable within our current level of capacity. Now, in order to be able to have that power locally, to make policy on those issues, and I'm sure county colleagues will appreciate that as well, we need instruments like this that sit beneath the local plan, but have that ability to actually help us regulate and use our democratic mandate to regulate on those issues. Now, supplementary plans that are being suggested by the government will be much more extensive than SPDs. So they will be much more difficult capacity-wise to put through, longer consultation periods, more officer time required. So one of those issues that we have with this is that obviously we'll not be able to have the diversity, if you like, of democratic representation on issues, on local policies like the SPDs, to the same extent that we would have it on supplementary plans, because of the nature of those plans, obviously. And lastly, before I close out, just about the bits on the plans about past behavior of developers, and obviously taking that into account as a material consideration in planning for approving or not approving planning proposals. And, I fully understand the sentiment there. Obviously, we have a lot of speculation. We have people buying sites going for planning application and then not using the sites, selling them off, or all of that sort of thing. But what I would say is that we cannot expect the planning system to solve all our problems. I mean, if people are not building after they get planning application approved, that might mean that they have high borrowing costs. It might mean that they have high construction costs, labor costs, and so on. It might mean that the interest rates on the macroeconomic level are not appropriate for them to move forward with developing something. So whilst I understand why the government is thinking, well, you know what, we should consider past behavior from developers before giving them permission to build something. I do understand that, but at the same time, I would caveat it and say that it's more about the national level and what the government is doing on a macroeconomic level to actually promote development. It's not about planning authorities having to solve this problem. It's a national issue. So I'll just leave that there. Just good ideas as well. I mean, social rent, yes, excellent. Well done on the government actually, picking this up and saying at last, we have to give more weight on that. But again, it's about the government also explaining how they're going to support with building more houses for social rent and so on and so forth. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yes, very interesting, and I think again, we need to see what comes out with the supplementary documents, etc., and how easier these proposed supplementary plans will be. Are they going to create more problems than they solve? Or, like a lot of these things, you need to be careful what you wish for, don't you? Interesting in terms of what you said about the developers, because I do worry often with large scale development applications. Excuse me. You spend a lot of time assessing it, going backwards and forwards. I'm talking about the officers. They're going backwards and forwards and negotiating with developers and agreeing maybe a master plan, etc. All sounds absolutely fine. And then, guess what? Permission's given, and 6 months later or 3 months later, all right, they apply for variations. And you sort of go back and you start over again. So, oh, well, this isn't viable, that's not viable. But they've now got that basic permission. Therefore, suddenly, whereas if that had been proposed at the initial application stage, could well be members might have said, well, we don't agree with that, we object to that proposal. But now that they've got their basic permission, to then come back and ask for variation, and then it's a bit more difficult if you don't like it or want to object to it. It's more difficult to find substantial planning reasons to object to it, given the fact that you've already given what's in effect, if you like, outline permission, etc. I just sort of pose that as it's something I've encountered in the past anyway. I don't know, Matt, if you have any response at all to what Pavlos has said?
Nothing specific, Chair. No, I think we covered most of that in our response.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
Could you press your?
Sorry.
Thanks.
I mean, I don't really want. I mean, I don't know that there's a need for any change. There's always ways of actually getting on and saying, well, we could do that better, and we could do this better, and we could do the other better. But Pavlos has made the fundamental point. The problem is not getting development going lies with the way, well, it's going to be corny about it, the way capitalism currently works. They can't finance the things they think they want to do. I've got 4 planning permissions for apartments in the Meadows. We've got homelessness in the Meadows, and I'll come on to that in a little bit. They got their planning permissions either 6 months or a year and a half or 2 years ago, and these are 4 examples I'm thinking of, and they're not building. And they're not building because they can't get the finances right. Now, I know there's a big part of that story is, of course, the chaos we had with Liz Truss, but they're not building. In fact, one of them's come back and said, you know what, that apartments we wanted to put on Queen's Road on the former cinema, what we actually want to do is convert that to a student application. Now, I don't particularly object to that either. I mean, we've got an extraordinary need on students now. The latest projection is that we think in Nottingham we will need 10,000 more bedrooms in 10 years' time. That's the scale of what we're dealing with. And the commercial pressure the commercial sector can do something about meeting that. I've got 1,000 new bedrooms on Traffic Street. I've got 300 bedrooms on Queen's Road. I've got an application being built for 300 more on Traffic Street. There's a debate on 300 more on top of that at Traffic Street. And there's an application granted for 400 on Queen's Road. And people are saying, why am I so pro building for students? I mean, I actually want all the other stuff done as well. But if we don't do something about getting the students to bedrooms, the pressure on the private rented sector is too much. And I'll say again, I've got people in decent jobs, people like school secretaries with teenage children, living in hotels the Sunday to the Thursday, in bed surfing with mates and families and friends on the weekends, not able to put their possessions anywhere. I've got someone else works in an office that I'm very close to, likely to be made homeless in the next 4 weeks because she's a private tenant, has been for years, but the landlord wants the house back for family reasons. Bang, it's gone. And that's the actual pressure we've got to be dealing with. We've got homeless families, and it isn't just students, it is longer living. It is people trying to live in smaller households, although that pressure must be being reversed. And I want legislation that's dealing with that. Now, in the meantime, Matt, can we be a little bit clear on what the situation is with street ballots? Street ballots. Balloting residents. Can you just confirm that if there's a former school site in the middle of the meadows that somebody wants to develop into housing, can all the houses that face that site have a vote and object to it under this plan? No. Right, okay.
The proposal for street ballots is that let's take an example, is probably the best way to explain it. If there's a cul-de-sac of bungalows and everyone on that cul-de-sac agrees that there should be a first floor extension, an allowance for first floor extensions, they can vote on that, and then that will become effectively, they will have planning permission to allow those extensions. But it doesn't give any additional rights to object to individual planning applications.
Right, thank you. Well, thank you, that's very helpful. So I don't need to make that point. I just want to take another point just to defend the existing planning system a little bit. Everyone knows Victoria Centre. Does everyone know that bit of the Victoria Centre that's over the road, connected by a bridge? Used to be a telephone exchange. And it's not the smartest bit. In fact, if you look at the preservation plans for Nottingham City Centre, it explicitly excludes this building because it is so horrible and you will not defend it. Now, in the space of 2 years, and I'm mindful of what you've said, Neil, about people coming back and renegotiating things, but what our officers have done, have worked with those developers who said they want to put student flats on top of proposals for 104 bedrooms. But they've actually persuaded them to do it in a style that's much more attractive, brick covering, stone, decoration in detail, and also the very dark ground floor surrounds of this building, which got no windows in it, turn it into something that actually looks like it could host lots of market stalls and make it attractive and handsome. This is the existing planning system working on our behalf. And I think the problem with deciding to create new systems is, all right, we are now vulnerable, of course, to those planners, those developers having decided, well, they'll try and renegotiate it now. They've got such a good deal, or we've got such a good deal. They'll try and renegotiate it, perhaps. We don't know. But the problem is, you put in another system. How many more years of holes and negotiations and little tricks have we got to go through to get to all of that? So I think there isn't a case for making these kind of changes, other than that are coming from the bottom up, in terms of people saying, well, this is how we could do a better job. But we have got to both celebrate what we can do with planning already, and then we've got to say the agenda has got to be, how does it help us get places for people to live, and how does it help us get the modern places for people to work? That's the agenda. I'm not sure the change in legislation is the first thing that I'd go to.
Right. Okay. Yes. Interesting. And actually, one of the points that Pavlos made about implementation of permissions as well. it is. Yes, I'm sure that in some cases it is finance, but I think in other cases sometimes developers have just got permission to land bank and then wait until maybe the market's a bit more buoyant before building. And I just wish there was a way in which we could come up with something that is in effect a penalty if they don't start building, because if everybody received planning permission for large developments and nobody started implementing that housing building, you're not going to be solving the housing problem. So I think that's sort of one of the, for me, that's one of the challenges that we collectively, as local government, need to find an answer to get developers to actually implement the permission that they've just been awarded or rewarded with. I've lost.
Yeah, and this is an interesting point on viability. What bugs me? I'm just thinking about this really seriously in terms of being a planning committee member on a planning committee, going in on the day, knowing about a planning reform, a planning change that gives the right to argue against the development on the basis of a certain developer not being appropriate, not having done the work previously, not really delivering the goods. So you're a planning committee member, you go into a planning committee session, and you already know that you can use that as a material consideration in planning. That's all of a sudden material consideration legislation. You can use it. You make a speech about it. You have a few other members on the committee listening to it. They take your side. They vote on it. You stop a development. It might be a good development. It might be a one that, because of the economy at the time, is viable. That developer may actually be able to produce the work that's necessary. But because it's a material consideration in planning on the outline level, planning committee members reject it. So how many of those instances will come to play when that legislation comes in? How much will planning committees perhaps dampen development in terms of not approving outline planning approvals on that level? So now we can say the developer is not doing it because we give the approval, planning committee did their work, but all of a sudden the developer decided not to build. It's their problem, isn't it? And then now we have the power to reject it. So how does that change? How many of those approvals are given? So are we facilitating development according to the NPPF bit that talks about facilitating development and helping the economy? Are we really doing that work then? If we can stop planning applications because of that, that's my question. I don't really know how this is going to play out, but we need to be facilitating development in cities and in counties, and we need to be working with the economy to boost the economy and build new housing units. How are we going to deliver on that if we can have the possibility of certain occasions like this to actually not give approvals, and therefore that being a planning issue rather than a developer issue? So, thanks, Neil.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated challenges, and it's just by definition, and I accept. I'm sure that the challenges in a tight city situation are different to the challenges in a rural situation. So I'm not saying one is more or less important, but they're certainly different challenges. That's for sure. Just very quickly, Michael.
Are you trying to suggest that perhaps we hadn't put kind of concerns you've got in the consultation feedback? The concerns you've just raised, do you think they're covered in the feedback, or did we need to?
Well, yeah, I think we have. Well, certainly, just wearing my district council hat for a second, we have expressed those as a borough council. So I think the government has been made aware of those concerns, and I think it depends whether you're looking at it or from which direction you're looking at it. And I think that's certainly from a rural situation. I think that's where the concerns exist. Making sure that developers do actually build and not just sit on the land. John.
Thank you, Chairman. I broadly support what our response, and it's been very interesting hearing what you've got to say. And of course, the devil's in the detail. And in my experience, because I do a bit of planning further north, the standards for climate change can affect the ventilation and condensation. So I know that's a little bit of a concentrated issue, but just when these things are looked at, please take that into consideration, because it's great to be able to ventilate some places when you get some really nice weather, open the windows, and it's a real pleasure to be able to do that.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, I think that's been a very useful discussion, and as I understand it, then the legislation will come back, hopefully taking into account the responses to the questionnaires, primarily from us, but maybe from other areas as well. So when we get that legislation, then we will have to react accordingly. Righty ho. Let's move on then to. So we've just been asked to note that, if everybody's in agreement with noting that. Okay. Item 5, the waste local plan, and come in, Stephen Pointer. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Excellent. This is a short report to update the committee about the progress on securing a joint waste local plan. We normally report on minerals and waste, but the major work at the moment is entirely on waste matters. We are working very well with the city colleagues to finalise the plan now, following the consultation on the draft last year, working on specific wording changes, agreeing those internally, and speaking to key consultees about those, particularly people like Historic England, Natural English Nature, Natural England, and so forth. We are moving to holding a joint member working group, which is scheduled for the 28th of March, when we'll be discussing, this is a working group internally, to discuss with the key elected members, particularly Councillor Kotsonis and yourself, Chair, as the to give you the key content of the proposed plan, so the key policies, and we'll be going through those step by step. The whole plan will then be finalised during April, and we plan to take the final plan to our cabinet at the end of May, with the City Council planning to take it to the next appropriate meeting following their elections during May. That's possibly likely to be in June, and we will then go to a publication stage where we invite any final representations on the plan before it is submitted for examination. So that's it. That's really the update. The other matter that is referred to in the report is the proposed visit to waste management facilities. We haven't forgotten about this, but we will be exploring that in the next couple of months once we've finished work on the waste plan. So I anticipate we'll be able to put that together for maybe June, July.
Okay, that's great. So basically, it's sort of a bit of a watching brief at the moment until we have that. Well, it's not very far away, actually, is it? 28th of March.
That's right. No, only a couple of weeks.
Yeah, fine. Okay. Just quickly then, Michael, any comment?
Yeah, we've been doing a consultation, and a couple of points that I hadn't fully appreciated before is that 35% of our domestic waste stream, I'm looking at Matt to correct me on this if I get this wrong, is food waste or food-related waste. And if we do a food collection scheme in the city, we could intercept 65% of that. And that has quite an impact, because not only are you reducing the waste stream for incineration, but you're actually getting both natural gas out of it and compost.
Can I just clarify? You said you were talking about 35%, and then you said you can intercept 65% of it.
Yeah, and,
But
and
I
what
don't
we'd be
understand what you
using,
mean by
and
that.
I don't know how good your eyesight is, Chair, and I don't know if the cameras can even see this, but I actually saw one of the bins, the food waste bins, that we actually used in a city scheme that we stopped about 10 years ago. And someone's still got it in their front garden because it's quite a secure piece of kit. It's both a handle that acts as a lock. And there's a few myths gone round about this. We did the scheme for part of the city. There's about 4 wards in the city that had the scheme about 10 years ago or so. And people actually, our assessment in checking what people's memory of it was they quite enjoyed using it. What happened was that it went wrong because the food that was being collected, we ended up having to ship it as far away as Norwich, which ain't particularly environmentally friendly, and it got more and more expensive to do. Now I understand we've got 2 anaerobic digesters at Colic, and one I think I always mix up Alfreton and Ilkeston, but there's one there as well. And in fact, one of the digesters at Colic, if you chucked a tin of baked beans in, it would crack the tin of baked beans open, eat the beans, turn that into compost and gas, and chuck the metal out. So the technology on this has got better, the provision of it has got higher and nearer. And I think there's a sense in which our thinking on this needs to change. Now, again, I think the challenge is going to be is that we're probably not going to be given money to do this, but it's the obvious thing we should be doing. We should be having a drive on tackling food waste. So I think the consultation is really interesting. I think the technology has moved on, the ideas are around, and the viability of it is much better. You just need a bit more help with that first stage. Now, remind me, colleagues, is it 2025 we start rolling this out in Nottingham? And it's a 4-year programme to cover the whole city. Is that what we're doing, anyone?
Let me just bring. I agree. I think food waste is a challenge because it's going to be a very expensive operation. But Stephen, can you just come back just to clarify the timescale and also, as I understand it, that's all part of this process that we're progressing with in drawing up this plan and food waste is all part of that.
Yes, it is, Chair. It's the part of the target or the ambition for the amount of recycling we will be expected to do over the lifetime of the plan. The plan extends to 2038 over a 15-year period. And we are both city and county targeting 65% recycling rate. To achieve that rate does require food recycling to be part of the mix. And Councillor Edwards is probably referring to the City Council's own waste strategy, which was out for consultation in the autumn. Certainly referred to food waste being part of that mix going forward. I'm not quite sure of the position in the county, but it will have to be a similar arrangement whereby we are capable of collecting food waste, and there's other initiatives the government are involved in terms of glass recycling and producer responsibilities that will all be part of that. So it is part of the plan assumes that councils over the period will be collecting food waste and directing it to the recycling facilities that has been referred to. We do have sufficient capacity in those recycling facilities to do that. It's just making it happen.
Sure. Okay. And yes, but that can all be part of the discussion as we gradually progress it through. Pavlos.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there are 2 different types of plans. We're talking about municipal waste strategy on one side, and then you have the Nottinghamshire and Nottingham Waste local plan. So, obviously, the one is more generic in scope than the other one, because obviously we need something more specific for the city, and that will cover the detail of it. That Councillor was talking about as well. I think from my perspective, what is really important is when we get the feedback back, to make sure that the points raised from the public about recycling and about maximizing our capacity for recycling, and also the carbon footprint of waste and how far waste has to travel to be able to go somewhere. All of that sustainability needs to be part of the plan. So I'd like to review it with you, Neil, and make sure that we make it as sustainable as possible. Really.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Transport, the effect on the environment, and the transport costs, both aspects. I mean, they're both part of the equation, aren't they? Definitely. So, okay, so basically that's still in progress, and so we're noting that we'll be coming back to discuss it fairly shortly again.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Stephen. Let's move on to item 6. So this is the transport update. Am I correct? Is this a duo with Kevin and Tim? I'll leave it up to you as to who is talking to this first.
Yes, it is, Chair. Thank you for allowing to speak on this. I'm sorry I can't be with you. I have the COVID, so I'm sure you don't want it. But I've written most of this report, I think. So there are just one or two things I'd just make a point about. So first of all, we are, as the city, and I think the county as well, have put in some bids for more active travel funds. So there's a scheme gone in to the department for looking up doing a cycle pedestrian scheme along Porchester Road in Nottingham. So we're waiting that the result of that bid. We've also awarded a tender to Lime Bike for the new e-bike hire scheme, and that should be launching by the end of this month. And also, we are quite keen to make sure that our active travel social prescribing pilot project is also launched in the next month or two. We are recruiting new people to link worker posts through the health services, which will do most of the work on that. But again, that's something we are progressing at the moment, and hopefully that be a good addition to the things that we've been doing already.
Great, thanks. Anything to add at all, Kevin?
On a similar front, we've been doing public health funding, active travel measures as well on a personal travel behaviour programme. It's sometimes difficult to report back to this committee because it doesn't necessarily, and it's a bit cross areas. So some of the bits might be in Greater Nottingham and some of the bits are in North Notts, but they're not reported separately. But I can get a report giving a bit more detail next time around because the programme hasn't yet finished. It finishes at the end of March. And again, we're equally putting in active travel fund bids. I haven't been able to get hold of the details because the details gone in over a time when the individual officer who's been doing it has been on leave. So again, but I can report back to the next committee which schemes these have gone in for.
Right. Okay. Yep. Thanks for that. Yes. Well, as the report says, both the city and the county are been no pun intended, active travel bids. There's always the ongoing challenge of getting the zero emissions vehicles in place, and then I'm sure we're both busy with the bus service improvement plan bids. All these things involve so much money, and I think that's the challenge, is being able to attract sufficient funding in order to be able to achieve these things. I think we all probably share the same ambitions. It's just trying to attract that funding to actually achieve those ambitions, which is the big challenge. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Audrey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the update. I'm surprised we've not actually included anything from Streets for People as part.
Repeat that last. Not developing.
We're not including anything for Streets for People as part of this, because I mean that's in terms of roads, pathways, infrastructure, and where government actually needs to give us a lot more money, because it's not, it's only touching a tip of the iceberg in terms of this conditions of the roads around the city and the county. So obviously need more funding there, but I'm surprised the report does actually cover the money that we've got from government to date and the work that we're doing on the Streets for People program for the next couple of years and where we are at this point in time. So I thought perhaps a future report would include that. But also, I think in terms of active travel, I think it's all good news for citizens in particular. The e-bike scheme that's due to come on at the end of March will add to our public transport offer as we move towards trying to achieve carbon neutrality by 2028. But again, it'll be rolled out for parts of the city. But I think one of the other things that is got this, obviously, the social prescribing and actually the behavioural change that will bring in terms of areas where we've improved cycle infrastructure, because that's where the social prescribing has been targeted, and we'll wait to see how that actually improves people's access to cycling, but also people behaviour and confidence to actually get on a cycle, as we actually encourage more people into using public transport. And I'd like to mention two things that are actually outside of this report. One, clearly, I'm sure we're actually going to talk about it, is the disappointment with the government's further delays on the HS2. But also, when we think about public transport and the sustainability of public transport and how that contributes to CN28, it's the support government's, or should I say the government's not putting support where I think it needs to in terms of sustainability of public transport post June of this year, in terms of buses in particular, but also the government's lack of support around the tram support as well, as we see the recovery from the pandemic. And those are a couple of areas that I'd like officers to perhaps shed some light on, but also the implications of the delays on HS2 for not just the north, but the impacts for the Midlands as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that. So, Tim, have you any response to that?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the comments about Street for People. Yes, I think it should be that we could do another report to a future committee on this. I'm sorry that it obviously wasn't included in this one, but I will take that back and see if we can get it in a future one. And again, I think we agree with you on the issues to do with HS2, and also the support for public transport post June 2023. I should have added that the current fares package that the government introduced, the £2 single fare on buses, has been extended for another 2 months, I think, or 2 or 3 months.
I think it's
allow
3 months. I think it's 3 months. I think
3 months to allow the thing to continue, and also there's been an extension to the bus recovery grant as well for another 3 months. But I agree with you that the uncertainty of such short-term funding really doesn't help our operators or our passengers.
Right. Okay. So basically bring it back to another to a future date. Just following Michael and Pavla. Kevin, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, the same from the county perspective. We echo the concerns and the delays to HS2, and obviously we're constantly trying to liaise and work towards promoting HS2 and enhancing the opportunities that can bring. And equally, we struggle with the public transport support, and one of the things that we've currently been trying to do is look at things through the bus service improvement plan as to whether there needs to be more emphasis towards supporting existing services, because there's no point as doing bus priority if we don't have any buses running along the routes. So it's very much about making sure that we maximise what's there and maintain what's there and enhance what is there, and not just look to add to new things, which is what government ideally wants us to do.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Fine. I can't remember who put the hand up first, but Pavlos, you're looking at me at the moment, so
That's all right, sir. Just to talk about all this. I mean, obviously, very good report. And just to say that obviously moving on to a more sustainable kind of future is not just about um, infrastructure. It's not just about bricks and mortar. It's about behavioural change, and that's why I'm really pleased to see obviously this section here, the 1.6 million invested on walking and cycling services and activities. I mean, it's really about behavioural change. I mean, walking and cycling is a modus vivendi. It's a way of life. It's a choice that you make, and it's not just it's not just about having the right facilities, which is obviously really important, but it's also about encouraging people to make those life changing kind of decisions of moving away from using a car and starting to cycle or to walk more if distances are smaller. So this 1.6 million there invested in all those things, especially when it has to do with one of our leisure centres, Harvey Haddon Centre, and linking up with the community and voluntary sector to encourage those changes is really important. So I just wanted to pick that up, and obviously the electrification of the fleet, really significant. The work on taxis, really significant. Active Travel England, 200 million again. To do more on cycling and walking infrastructure, again, really significant. So lots of good stuff in here, including, of course, the Lime Bike scheme that's being introduced into the city. So and thanks to Audra, obviously, for her sterling work on that.
thanks, Michael, and then Jim.
I wonder if the officers can confirm whether the Levelling Up bill does actually say that one of its ambitions is to achieve a London style or London level of public transport in our main cities by 2030. Because that's what I saw on a YouTube video, and I always have to be careful about using YouTube as a reference, Chair. But I've got to say, where are these people coming from if they think they can simply put in legislation that we shall have a London-style public transport system? Now, maybe in Nottingham we haven't quite got as far as to go as some other of the major cities, but blooming heck, what a statement! But if it's true, we need the money to back that up. And I mean, compare and contrast that with what's going on with the High Speed 2, where the government have actually got some control, and they're slipping out a statement at 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon so that they don't take questions on it until another 3 full working calendar days. Sorry. The other YouTube video I saw recently, Chair, all the new railway stations in Britain are announced for this year and the next couple of years. And of course I looked through it because I knew it wouldn't be there. I was looking for the new railway stations in the East Midlands. It's not happening, is it? And I was a bit surprised at some of the stuff that's happening elsewhere. Freight lines in the northeast that are being converted to rail passenger lines, and some stations being provided, the video said, on the back of a 600 strong housing estate. Now, I can't quite believe that 600 houses would be enough to justify a railway station, and I can see the officer shaking his head. I can't be right, it isn't right. But what it'll be something that takes it over the top. And I'm just wondering, because we had such an ambition for this when I was a county councillor, the Greater Nottingham Area Railway Development Strategy, in that sense of, could we not get a suburban railway network going in the conurbation? And I just wondered whether the county officer can advise me on what the chances are. I think I know what the answer is going to be, but I do think the point needs to be raised again. And then just on the cycling thing, a number of colleagues in the city will know of a colleague who actually got injured in a cycle accident recently. And we don't want to make too much about it, but it's pretty clear that the driver decided to cut across, turning left into a street that driver was not allowed to turn into, drove across the cyclist. So as far as I know, has destroyed the bike, but we're waiting to see and injured the cyclist. Now, that's someone that we happen to know. I think the figure is, and again, it's YouTube. Again, apologies, Chair. Apologies, officers, if you know better. 2 cyclist deaths a week in Britain. We have got to do something about changing the respect for cyclists. And of course, there's this terrible, tragic case of a lady who's actually got put in jail for 3 years for manslaughter because she's gestured at a cyclist and forced her into a car. That's just tragic all round, I know. But that sense of what can we do to get a change in the culture so that people calm down, slow down, and give the cyclists the respect so they can get back on the roads again. Chair, transport is my favourite subject. I would work for the railways, but I could talk for ages about it. Streets of People's given me so many opportunities to do green things and tree things that I've been wanting to do for a long time. So Streets of People is very special for us. But what can we do, please, about this idea that the government now expects us to have London-style transport by 2030? The high-speed 2 is going backwards, and the railway stations are being built in other parts of the country, but not to serve Nottingham. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, well, actually, I do share your concern that people in basement level 4 of Whitehall think that every city and settlement in the country are all nicely, neatly symmetrical, like London is, and it all just sort of radiates out in a standard form. So I think that they need to be enlightened that it's not quite like that. Kevin, is there anything you can come back with on that?
I can. I'll let Tim answer about whether Nottingham can follow the lead of London-style public transport levels, but. Moving on to other things, I would agree entirely. I cannot believe that a 600 settlement would generate enough trips to support a rail service. The subsidy would just not stack up. We have obviously been promoting a number of rail lines, whether that's Robin Hood Line, whether that's Maid Marian Line. Maid Marian Line's got a Restoring Your Railways Fund bid already submitted, but no response. And Robin Hood Line, we've been doing the work on, and that'll be going to the Department for Transport very shortly. And again, we're looking to reopen freight lines to passenger services, and we'll see what happens. But it unfortunately then goes out of our control. As regards to the Greater Nottingham rail system, the great difficulty with rail short distances is the modelling systems do not stack up to evidence the fact that these will generate a great deal of trips. And so the subsidies that are required to put forward to suggest that you're going to put the bid in and enable the service to happen, generally speaking, means that local authorities just cannot afford to take that risk. Yeah, we all recognise that these would be opportunities and may serve benefits, but the budgets required to do them are a little bit restrictive. So we tend to pick on the ones that are more promotable in the short term, ones that tend to show that there's the modelling numbers to support them, which are more the Robin Hood Line and the Maid Marian Line at the moment. But we haven't forgotten about them, and we do maintain these as corridors because as things move back to more sustainable transport, we would like to think there'll be more opportunities. But wait and see where we get to. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Tim, do you want to add anything on the London style transport?
Okay, thank you, Chair. My take on this is that Nottingham actually does have a
Oh dear, we've just lost you.
compared well with London. Can you hear me now, Chair?
Could it? Sorry, you just froze just for a second. Perhaps could you just repeat what you just said?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're fine now.
So I think that I can say that Nottingham actually compares very well to London. In fact, a lot of features of the Nottingham system are in many cases actually better than London. For example, real-time information at bus stops is much better than London. Services in terms of the vehicle offering are often a much higher quality. And of course, Nottingham also has, through the Robin Hood card and other things like that, it can equally offer things that, like capping of fares on both the bus and the tram, and service frequencies in Nottingham, to be quite frank, are almost as good as London. And the reason I can say that, Chair, is that actually I do actually live in London, and my experience is that Nottingham is far better than the London experience. Now, I can't comment on whether there is a 2030 aspiration to have a system the same as London. I mean, there are things of the London system that aren't yet in Nottingham. So, for example, use of things like Robin Hood cards on rail services for the limited number of stations that would be within the Robin Hood area. But in terms of levelling up to London's standards, Nottingham is doing very well. And the other part is, obviously, you mentioned about cycling. I think your figure of 2 cyclists a week in the UK is probably about right for the UK as a whole. And of course, every accident or collision of that sort is a tragedy. And so, yes, we do have a need to significantly educate people, particularly drivers, on the need to do things right by cyclists and by pedestrians, for that matter.
Right, yeah. Thank you for that. No wonder you want HS2 so quickly, so you can commute to Nottingham quicker and more easily. Right.
Well, I do commute to Nottingham when I'm well, Chair, and I come and I usually spend 2 or 3 days a week staying in Nottingham to do it. But just my personal circumstances mean that I have to stay in London at the moment.
Right. Yeah. Oh, so you're boosting the Nottingham tourist industry at the same time as well. Jim.
It's just a quick one. I mean, it's been partly mentioned to some extent about the viability of opening up stations on Robin Hood line, but I'm just wondering, has it been looked into? And there's lots of controversy about Top Wigate for other reasons, but there's 500 odd houses going there. It's right next to Linby, so it's effectively next to Linby. It's right on that edge of Hucknall. So it's a huge area of actual commuting areas. And I'm just wondering if they're looking into the Robin Hood line, maybe actually putting a stop at Linby, so it would be just before Newstead, because that may or may not be viable. I just wonder if it's been looked into. And on the e-bikes, Nottingham e-bikes, I was just wondering, are they restricted the same as the e-scooters, or will they be able to go into Carlton, out of the city without any problems? Because the e-scooters go literally into my patch. They actually get onto my road and then stop, because it's in the county. I'm so close to the boundary. So, just are the e-scooters limited in the same way, or are they not limited at all? The e-bikes, sorry. Are they limited the same as the e-scooters?
Well, I'll ask for clarification, but I thought that the e-bikes actually came into West Bridgeshire, but I'll stand corrected on that. Tim, are you able to help with that?
Thank you, Chair. As far as I'm aware, the e-bike scheme is the same boundary as the e-scooter scheme. So the e-bikes are restricted within the City Council boundary.
Right. Okay. Thanks. John.
Yes. The Retford-Gainsborough line goes through West Burton. They used to run coal into West Burton. And there used to be a station half a mile from West Burton, which was closed by Beecham. So that line is still used to get to Lincoln. And in fact, I flagged it up to staff because they'd never even mentioned it. But the consultation was a sort of, are you looking at a station? and suddenly, possibly the officers have not got wind of it yet, but suddenly at the step level, including the executive level, that is now on the cards as the step fusion plant is built. They're looking at a station there, which will enable people to travel from works at Retford and Lincoln to that site. Well,
Yeah, the
West Burton.
West Burton.
Yeah.
it's step fusion. It was discussed in cabinet yesterday, and the prospect or the possibility of a station was put on the table as well. So yeah, so it's on the radar. Let's put it that way. Absolutely, Audrey.
Thank you, Chair. We should be surprised that government's looking at us in terms of the city, in terms of what we have in terms of our public transport. The minister's actually coming to Nottingham at some point to look at the tram and the bus service, and it may well be that they see Nottingham as closest to be operating an integrated system outside of London, because we are the largest outside of London. We have 93 journeys per head, which is the second largest outside of London for bus journeys. So I think, you know, it's something as a city council, Labour city councillor, that I'm extremely proud of that, and I'm sure my colleagues are too. So that's one point. And then on the second point, which is a sad point, and it kind of picks up on Mike's point about respect for cyclists, because I understand, sadly, in the county there's been a death of a pensioner caused by a 14-year-old on an e-scooter. So my question would be, you know, what are we doing to what you know? We have a challenge for government to actually look at legislating e-scooters, especially private e-scooters, because those are the ones that are causing problems for not just for pedestrians but for motorists as well. So I think there's something that we need to be doing there too.
Yes, I agree. I mean, they're quite intimidating because you can't hear them largely for a lot of the time. Therefore, they become, I think, quite a shock to people when they appear without any sort of pre-warning, if you like. Similar to, I suppose, to a lesser extent, electric cars. At least you can hear the tyre noise, but you can't hear the e-bike or the e-scooter noises. So yes, it is a challenge for sure, and it's something that we've got to grapple with I think that's why a lot of the regulations or the guidance for formulating active travel schemes have been sort of updated, because they're trying to take account of this mode of travel, as well as and I think pedestrians and motorized vehicles in whatever form don't mix, do they? And it's now trying to separate the pedestrians from whether it's two wheels or four wheels. So I did just want to touch on as well, because on the buses, just wanted to have noted that in the county as well, we are looking at on-demand services, and because we have a lot of remote services, rural services, where quite often you know there's empty buses going past with nobody on, and at the same time then somebody's complaining that why haven't we got a bus service. So it's always a challenge, and that's why we're trying to get a sales campaign underway to persuade people to use the buses, because otherwise it's the old adage, the well-worn phrase, you know, use it or lose it, which is why we are changing our emphasis. Rather than having a scheduled bus route that's going empty, we're piloting the Not Bus on Demand schemes in a couple of, well, it'll be a third area very shortly, where they will be servicing remote and isolated areas on demand, and then connect to a scheduled bus route. So far, the feedback on that, two trials that have been underway, has been excellent, and it's been very well used. And the advantage is that you've got a vehicle going around pretty much all the time carrying passengers, rather than travelling empty between certain points. So initial feedback is that it's working out pretty well. That's why I want to roll it out further. Right, Michael.
Yeah, the one bit where we definitely don't compare with London is trains. We just don't have that kind of network. We don't have a network rail. Now, of course, network rail is a phenomenon. But Gurnards wasn't just a county scheme. There were two stations for the city, Woolerton and what was called, I've forgotten the name of the street now, but what I think should now be called in Lenton should be called the Jubilee Campus, because there's been the most phenomenal development next to that Faraday Road. Thank you, Chair. You know it better than I do. We should be finding a way of getting that done. So if someone's got a vision of getting us up to London style transport, that would be the obvious thing I would be going for. Is say let's push on the rail where there's clearly missed opportunities. We could do doing better as well about supporting journeys from Bulwell. And it wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea, but I think the idea that actually people want to reach the Jubilee campus, I think that's such an attractor to what it was a few years ago. It's transformed that part of the city. It's incredible now what's there, and that absolutely should justify a railway station. Now, if you look at Birmingham, they've got a university railway station. We should be having a Jubilee. I imagine the one to Beeston isn't quite near the main old campus, which is why it's never been done. But Jubilee, I think, should be done. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, perhaps we can take all those comments into account as we progress things through. Right, let's move on to item 7, and this is JPAB. I think there's a certain amount of overlap from our first item, wasn't there, on the MPPF? But Matt, do you want to report back on JPAB?
I will. Yeah, this is your regular update. As ever, we're slightly out of kilter because the meetings happen, normally a week or two apart. However, important points to note from Joint Planning Advisory Board, particularly on the strategic plan, are that the Erewash Borough Council local plan core strategy review examination has begun. The inspector has issued some initial questions which the Borough Council has responded to, and they await feedback now from the inspector on their response. Ashfield District Council are intending to publish their Regulation 19 local plan. That's their main consultation stroke publication plan later this year. And in terms of the Greater Nottingham strategic plan, the consultation on the growth options on that recently concluded. We're currently processing all the responses that we've received. We're hoping to complete that process by the end of March. Some of the key highlights of those responses that we have processed so far are at Appendix 2, and I can just update you on the number of comments, which is now in excess of 800 as opposed to the 645 reported at the time of writing. And the summary of the responses, which hasn't changed significantly from what we have here. The greater weight of responses in terms of both number and pages was from the development industry. We haven't had a significant response from private individuals, and we think that is because most of the proposals are already included in adopted local plans, so that there aren't any new surprises out there for people to concern themselves about. But the main issues raised are the plan period is too short and should be longer, that the vision is insufficiently pro-growth as housing targets are set below the combined standard method and aren't aspirational enough. There is no reliance on brownfield sites within Nottingham City, which have historically been slow to come forward. and generally speaking, in terms of housing need, as you would expect, the development industry is very critical of the council's approach. Generally speaking, saying the housing provision should be at least at the level of the combined standard method, and then proposing that they could happily make up that shortfall on the site that they are promoting in whichever district that might be. We will continue to process these responses, as I said, hopefully getting there by the end of the month. There are a few elements of both peer review and evidence-based preparation that we're also kicking off. We are programming in an advisory visit from the Planning Inspectorate to give us an early steer on the likelihood of the plan being found sound, the robustness of the evidence base, and what we can do to address any of the issues that the inspector might identify. And we will shortly be commissioning the remaining planks of the evidence base, which will include a town centres study, habitats regulations assessment, and various other pieces of evidence that we need to put in place, as well as progressing the transport modelling alongside the HS2 growth plan. Thank you, Chair.
Right, okay, thanks for that. Any questions or comments? Just right, okay, lovely. Right, thanks for that very much. So, final thing, item 8, the work programme, which is there set out. Any particular questions or comments at all from anybody? We'll just take that as the plan.
Well, I think it's great. We're going to be talking about High Speed 2 in June.
Sorry, say that again.
You're going to be talking about High Speed 2 in June.
Oh, well, yeah. There you go. It'll be high speed getting to June, won't it? Lots to do between now and June. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Right, so, sorry, Stephen?
Yes, I was just going to mention we did update the work programme following the last meeting when councillors did make a few suggestions. I'll discuss that issue around HS2 with Kevin and how much we can say, what we can say at that stage further. And we'll add also, there was a request to present on the minerals plan, update on the level of need for sand and gravel. And although it's not put on the work programme at the moment, and we'll be looking at potentially putting a report to December when we'll have figures available from operators on the sales they've undertaken. So it'll give an issue around the need, the future need for sand and gravel.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Great, lovely. Okay, doke. Right, thanks very much indeed, everybody. Thanks for your attendance, and thank you on the screen. You can, I think the snow's probably clearing, if not cleared.
It has.
Yeah. Okay, great, lovely. Thanks very much, everybody. Cheers.
Good.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.